For over 70 years, the border between NATO and Russia has been the most scrutinized line on the planet. But what if that line finally breaks? A direct conflict between these powers wouldn't just be a war, it would be a global tectonic shift, reordering the world as we know it. Xuan. To understand how we get there, we have to look at the decades of mounting tension, broken treaties, and expanding alliances. Military planners focus on a few key regions. The most critical is the Suwalki Gap, a narrow corridor that connects NATO allies. The war likely starts with a miscalculation, a border incident or a localized skirmish that spirals out of control within minutes. The moment Article 5 is invoked, the principle of an attack on one is an attack on all turns a local fight into a world war. Xuan. NATO's immediate response would be air-centric. The goal: total air superiority over the European theater within the first 48 hours. But Russia's S-400 and S-500 systems create bubbles of denied airspace, making every sortie a high-stakes gamble. On the ground, the conflict would be a brutal, high-intensity clash of modern armor, the likes of which hasn't been seen in generations. NATO's heavy divisions would race to reinforce the front, while Russian forces would aim for a rapid fait accompli in the Baltics. Russia would rely on its strategic depth and mobile artillery, using long-range strikes to disrupt NATO logistics far behind the lines. Xuan. But while the tanks roll, the first casualties would be invisible. The cyber domain would be the first true battlefield of the war. Xuan. Power grids, communication networks, and satellite GPS would be targeted to blind the enemy and sow chaos among civilian populations. Xuan. At sea, the battle for the GIUK Gap and the North Atlantic would determine if NATO reinforcements from North America can even reach Europe. Xuan. Quiet, lethal submarines would hunt each other in the depths, targeting the vital undersea cables that carry the world's data. Xuan. NATO's carrier groups would provide mobile airfields, but they would face a constant threat from hypersonic anti-ship missiles. Xuan. Even space would not be a sanctuary. Anti-satellite weapons would turn the orbital plane into a graveyard of debris, blinding both sides. Xuan. Within days, the global economy would collapse. Energy prices would skyrocket, and global supply chains would simply cease to function. Xuan. The interconnected world we take for granted would shatter, as every nation scrambles to secure food and energy for its own people. Xuan. Europe, in particular, would face an existential energy crisis, testing the political unity of the alliance to its absolute limit. Xuan. The human cost would be staggering. Millions would be displaced, fleeing the conflict zones in the largest refugee crisis in history. Xuan. But the ultimate question isn't about tanks or ships, it's about the nuclear threshold. At what point does a conventional war turn nuclear? Xuan. The use of tactical, low-yield nuclear weapons as a de-escalation tool could be the spark that leads to total global destruction. Xuan. Once the nuclear seal is broken, the ladder of escalation is short, and it leads directly to mutually assured destruction. Xuan. There are no winners in a nuclear exchange. The environmental and societal collapse would last for centuries, not just years. Xuan. If the war stays conventional, it could turn into a grinding stalemate, a war of attrition that drains the resources of both East and West. Xuan. A new Iron Curtain would fall, dividing the world into two hostile armed camps for the foreseeable future. Xuan. The position of China would be the wild card. Would they remain neutral, or would they see an opportunity to reshape the Pacific? Xuan. The conflict could quickly expand into a truly global World War III, with fronts opening from the Arctic to the South China Sea. Xuan. Domestic stability would be tested everywhere. Inflation, rationing, and the trauma of war would push societies to the breaking point. Xuan. The cost of defending democracy and sovereignty would be paid in the blood of a new generation. Xuan. Artificial intelligence and autonomous weapons would make the battlefield faster and more lethal than any human can react to. Xuan. Truth would be the first casualty. A flood of deepfakes and disinformation would make it impossible for the public to know what is real. Xuan. Even if the guns fall silent, the world would be unrecognizable. The era of globalization would be dead, replaced by regional fortress economies. Xuan. The trust required for international cooperation would take decades, if not centuries, to rebuild. Xuan. This scenario is why deterrence exists. The horror of what could be is the only thing keeping the peace today. Xuan. Ultimately, the most powerful weapon in the NATO or Russian arsenal isn't a missile or a tank, it's the diplomat's pen. Xuan. We study these scenarios not because we want them to happen, but because we must ensure they never do. Xuan, the price of failure is a world in ruins. The price of peace is constant, tireless vigilance and dialogue. Xuan, what steps do you believe are necessary to prevent this hypothetical catastrophe from becoming a reality? Xuan, thank you for watching this deep dive into the unthinkable. Join the conversation in the comments below. Xuan, stay informed, stay vigilant, and most importantly, stay engaged in the pursuit of a peaceful future. Xuan.